Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hasan Show. It's my last day with MSNBC.
Well, MSNBC's best asset announced last night on his show that he is officially leaving the network completely, which comes as a bit of a surprise considering on November 30th, MSNBC announced that they would be canceling his show, but that he would be moving into a political analyst and fill-in host role. But that's no longer happening. So I'm going to show you his announcement, and then I'm going to show you another clip and give some speculation as to why he's making this move.
It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past 3 years with an amazing team of producers behind me and with all of you watching at home. It's been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024 with an election coming, a war still ongoing, and too many Trump trials, honestly, to even keep track of, and with this show going away, I've decided that it's time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hasan Show. It's my last day with MSNBC. Yes, I've decided to leave. To be clear, I am so proud, so proud of what we've achieved on this show, on this network. And I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say, new year, new plans. You can continue to follow me online at Mehdi R. Hasan on Instagram, on Threads, and of course Twitter or X, where I'll give you updates on what's coming next for me. For now, from me, for one last time on this network, good night.
All right. So I'm going to, in a bit, show you the so far one MSNBC host I saw actually acknowledge that he's leaving. Maybe there's more, but so far I've seen one. They're all afraid. Let's just get real here. Like all these, everyone's afraid of saying anything negative towards their own company or acknowledging the obvious mistake that their network is making. But Mehdi Hasan, of course, utilized his platform well, as he always did. Utilized it well last night by bringing on a Gaza photojournalist to discuss the ongoing Israeli attacks on journalists, which have been unprecedented. You can compare what Israel has done to journalists in Gaza to any other war in the past 100 years. It's unprecedented. So to see this acknowledged on a mainstream network is incredibly important. That said, what is the reach of cable news at this point? I'm glad that Mehdi Hasan didn't just relegate himself to the sidelines here as a fill-in host or random analyst occasionally on the network, because he is someone who deserves to have his own TV show. So, I'd be shocked if he went to CNN. I don't think CNN would hire him. So I in terms of my speculation, I don't know what he's going to do. Obviously, I don't. But he would be successful doing his own thing, his own venture, launching his own online show maybe. But I don't, I would be surprised if another network picked him up just because of how fantastic he is, which sounds weird to say, but that's the reality of it. Great journalists like this, people that give you, as I'm going to show you in a second here, fantastic interviews, people that actually push their guests, challenge power. People like this don't keep shows on television because they're too threatening to those in power. Corporations, or I should say these networks, which are corporations, but they want access. That is the number one for all these networks, is as long as we can get these people on our show, that's all we care about. Because if you start challenging them as a journalist like Mehdi Hasan does, you risk losing those guests or losing other guests because they're afraid of being challenged by him. So they all just lay down, bring these people on, and are very kind to them. Let me show you an example of what is being speculated right now around why MSNBC came to this conclusion, because they initially claimed that it was because, ratings, we want to mix up the weekend, which is true. They are mixing up the weekend. But it came out later that his ratings were actually great. So ratings can't be an issue. Waleed Shahid here may have some insight, writing, keep hearing that this great interview by Mehdi Hasan of Netanyahu advisor Mark Regev is one big reason that his show got canceled to Adversarial. I'm going to show you a clip from this interview, and this may give you an idea as to why he's canceled, because no other journalist on television does interviews like this.
I agree with you. We shouldn't blindly believe anything Hamas says. But why should we believe what your government says either? Your military spokesman on Monday pointed to an Arabic document in the basement of a Gaza hospital and claimed it was a Guardian list on which every terrorist writes his name. But that was false. It was just a calendar with the days of the week on it. Your colleague in the Prime Minister's office, Ophir Gendelman, posted behind-the-scenes footage from a Lebanese short film and claimed it was Palestinians in Gaza faking their own injuries. That tweet is still up a week later. That is endless disinformation from your government, is it not?
I disagree, and I think on the important issues, look, I'll give you an example, Mehdi. Originally, we estimated. No, answer your question. When we make a mistake, we admit it.
You're short on time.
Why does that give you permission? Why does that give you permission to accept Hamas's numbers? I don't understand.
I didn't ask about Hamas numbers. I said to you that your military spokesman...
No, but you were quoting to me before Hamas numbers, Mehdi. You were quoting to me Hamas's numbers.
Because the entire UN and the human rights community and the American intelligence community on Friday said they trust those numbers. But you're dodging my question, Mark.
I'm not sure that's true.
Why did your military spokesman on Monday point to a calendar in Arabic and say these are the names of terrorists on them? That's false. Can you accept that here and now?
I'm not aware of the incident.
Let's put up the image. We have the image. You have no comment.
I don't read Arabic. It doesn't help me. I have no comment. I'm not familiar with the incident.
Does your spokesman read Arabic?
Hang on, I have a question, Mehdi. You're a journalist. Have you made a professional mistake ever? Not intentionally, but have you made a professional mistake?
Exactly, and I own up to it.
Have you made a mistake?
So can you own up to the mistake?
So if I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes.
This is such a great example of what actual journalists, television journalists, should be doing. This made headlines. And, for obvious reasons, but at the same time, it shouldn't be making headlines because this should be the norm. This should be what you see every single day on television. There should be this kind of interaction with people in power. But that is not the kind of interviews that most people do, that most of these TV journalists do. And it's not necessarily because of the journalists themselves. It's because they know the boundaries of the network. They're hired because they don't do these kinds of interviews. That's why that's the whole decision process is made, or the whole decision of how the network conducts interviews is made in the hiring process. So it's not that necessarily networks are telling journalists don't be hard on this person. It's that they hired this person because they know they won't be this way, and because there's already a company culture in place where everyone does interviews the same, where even if they ask a hard question, it's followed up by a kind question. And then, thank you for coming on and being so nice. Like, it's just, you don't see interviews like this generally. And I guess, as I said, this made headlines. So, Mediaite, bringing it up, Fox News covered it. So this likely ruffled some feathers to those, whether it's higher ups at MSNBC or maybe in the Israeli government, and then threatening to pull guests in the future from MSNBC because they weren't playing nice. So this is... I really think this is, if anything, led to his show being canceled. It's this interview and interviews like this, because you have other people, to be fair, on the network now that are critical, have been critical of the right-wing Israeli government. Chris Hayes has been critical of them. Joy Reid has been critical of them. There are others. So it's not like it's just his position in acknowledging reality and siding with the UN and other human rights groups. It's that these sorts of interviews are being conducted. These interviews that really no one else does, even if they agree with the criticisms of the far right-wing Israeli government. Now, this was, another article here speculating that he was booted because of the interview. But MSNBC, of course, saying something different. So MSNBC President Rashida Jones reportedly told staffers that the network was reshuffling its weekend programming, cutting Hasan Show and adding a program with hosts including Democratic strategist Simone Sanders Townsend and former Republican National Committee Chair Michael Steele. You could not get more establishment than these two people who both worked with their respective parties. Simone Sanders worked in the Democratic Party. Michael Steele worked in the Republican Party. Like, these are the kinds of hosts that networks like MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, these are the kind of people that they like, because these are safe bets. They're not going to challenge power too much because they're really close to power. They've been in that position. But someone like Mehdi Hasan, who has a whole lifetime of being an actual journalist and challenging power, these are the kinds of people that lose their jobs. So, and the quote here, it's to better position ourselves as we head into the presidential election. Like, just pure corporate speak to say, we don't want anyone on air challenging actual power. We want to bring on the Democratic perspective and the Republican or the moderate Republican perspective in Michael Steele. When there are no moderate Republican voters, they're all just... If Trump is winning the primary already as much as he is, with all the indictments, with all the criminality, there is no moderate Republican voters. They do not exist. But still, they really try to bring these people... And Michael Steele now, I have to assume he's a Democrat at this point. He's been he's been criticizing the far right enough that I can't imagine he still votes Republican. But it just shows you the kind of hiring decisions that they like. And this is the one MSNBC host that I've seen actually acknowledge this. Again, maybe there are others now. But Chris Hayes saying, a huge loss for us, an exceptional host and colleague. Why isn't there more of this? Now, I mean, two reasons. Either they don't agree with Mehdi Hasan, which I think is the case with someone like Joe Scarborough. He's not going to bring up Mehdi Hasan and say it's a huge loss. But then there's also people who are just afraid of, their bosses at MSNBC. And they're maybe already writing or walking a tight line. They don't want to rock the boat too much by even acknowledging how much of a loss this is for the network. But good on Chris Hayes for acknowledging this. He understands that Mehdi Hasan's voice is incredibly important, especially right now with what Israel is doing and how Hasan's reporting has been exceptional in this space, at least in terms of television and how a television reporter discusses it. But it really is a massive loss for MSNBC, or really it's a massive loss for people that watch MSNBC, of which the numbers I'm sure are dwindling. But for people that need the message that Mehdi Hasan brings, that's the MSNBC audience. They're the ones that need that message, the CNN audience. And of course, the Fox News audience isn't going to see him. But the typical older voter, and that's who watches cable news. This isn't any criticism of the older people out there, because a lot of you don't watch cable news. But that's what the majority of the audience is. They're older voters, older viewers, and they're the ones that aren't as aware of, for example, what Israel is doing. So it's good to have someone like Mehdi Hasan on there discussing this. At the same time, what's best for him is to not be on there. What's best for him is to have the freedom to do the kind of reporting and journalism that he's used to doing, and to not be shackled down by, the executives at MSNBC. So I'm really curious to see where he goes. Again, I think he could do his own thing, start his own show. The online space is still, it's hard to make money online, but he's the kind of person that I think, regardless of where he ends up, he's going to have an audience.